Hello there, Rob.
Hello there, Todd. I am here.
Nice to have you back in town, and I guess you've been back for a while, though, huh?
A couple of weeks. I was out of the country for a while. Went to go visit the beautiful country of Taiwan. Actually, it was remarkable.
How was that? Do they serve Taiwanese food over there?
Yes, they do.
Is it as good as it is here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The food is excellent. The culture is excellent. What an unbelievably amazing country. Very safe, lots of economic freedom. Not a whole lot of other types of freedom. But the average person over there doesn't seem as concerned with it as maybe Americans are, which I think is maybe one of the last great hopes for this country is that people, no matter where they fall on the political spectrum in America, even the most ardent, woke Democrat still is accustomed to living as a free citizen. And when those freedoms are taken away, they're going to notice.
But they are taken away bit by bit. If it's done gradually, doesn't the warming water for the frog argument take effect?
Certainly. I mean, we're definitely drifting in the wrong direction, but I'm trying to maintain hope. And I still believe that there is something about being an American citizen that is ingrained in all of us, regardless of our political background. And there's got to be some issue that's going to reach even the most ardent liberal Democrat at some point to get them to wake up. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah, it's a nice hope. And I agree with you that people do basically have a feeling of pride. But this is one of the tricks that's been played upon us, is that the feeling of pride is ascribed to policies that get supported and passed by certain people and certain parties that have nothing to do, that contradict totally the idea of America and the idea of freedom.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, no, everything is feel-good legislation. So many topics to talk about. I mean, just one thing that popped this morning is I noticed there's a movement among home inspectors in Connecticut, people I do a lot of business with, that are, the kind of folks that you would pay when you're in the process of purchasing a home or a condo or something like that to go and look through the house and make sure, to advise you of what you're getting and the heating system's good and the roof's not leaking, et cetera. Well, they're obviously struggling because the real estate market
there's nothing happening, right?
Yeah, there's so few homes for sale, and they're selling right away, and there's such competitive bidding going on that people are bidding cash money, waiving inspections. So now the inspectors are, leaning on the lawmakers to make inspections mandatory. And this is exactly the kind of thing the Democrats love to do. Oh, it's such a good thing. Everybody should do it, blah, blah, blah. But we forget that this is a personal choice. And you would think home inspectors, people that are largely self-employed, independent business owners would recognize, that their services are important, but they have to sell themselves. They shouldn't be relying on the government to mandate that their services are required.
Well, and there's a lot of downsides coming down the pike if that gets achieved. There are hyper regulated areas of our society that just have no reason to be. Like, why do you have to go to school for a year or two to become a hair cutter? Right.
Oh, yeah. We already are required in Connecticut, Todd, to put smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in your home when you're going to sell it. But that's as far as the regulation goes. So that creates a false sense of security for the buyer. The buyer's like, oh, I'm protected because the seller is required to install these things. But there's no mandate on whether they're installed properly or they're even functioning or there's the appropriate placement or anything. So this is what happened. And it's the same kind of theory when it comes to licensing, that we just trust that someone who has a license from the state of Connecticut for some, home improvement contractor, for example, that they're actually qualified. And that can be farther from the truth. All you need is to pay the fee to get the license. And that's not true in every case. But the real measure of somebody's qualifications is they're being tested in the marketplace and being reviewed by, consumers, and they're competing with their fellow competitors in the marketplace.
So I think there was something we were supposed to talk about today. I don't know if we've touched on it yet. Do you know what the purpose of our get-together was?
Oh, yeah. Before I do that, though, let me just say a quick thing. I really enjoyed the last hour hearing you talk about the media, because that is like a huge problem in Connecticut, is that no one is reporting the other side of any story. Like every article that came out about the state budget was about how there was a big tax cut in the state budget. And you and I have talked, and I think that's not true. And anybody who was on the inside voting on that budget or looked at it knows that it's just a big, huge spending and tax increase. But there was almost no reporting of the other side of that issue. And it's so true. I mean, outside of Chris Powell's pretty good. And obviously, the yourself and people on talk radio, we get a lot of facts there. But the news media in the state is really causing a problem.
Do you have a sense of why that is? Why do you think that the news media, even if they know something is true, they don't report it? They just report the pablum that gets handed to them by the people in a certain governmental office.
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, first and foremost, it's access. I think that the media outlets in the state want to preserve their access to news, which means that they've got to have a decent relationship with the governor and the leadership in the legislature and places like that. And if they cross them, too many times, they might lose some of that access. I also think that, most media in Connecticut doesn't pay very well. So you're not getting really high quality talent or people that are, thoughtful. You're getting a lot of very young, fresh out of college journalists who don't have the experience to be, putting the fact-finding part of the story there. They're just reporting he said, she said. And I think that's a failure most of the time because, I can say 2 + 2 = 4 and my opposition could say 2 + 2 = 5. I mean, it's the job of the news to also say they looked into it,
Right.
2 + 2 is 4.
There was, they say all the time that we reached out to so-and-so, but they didn't have comment at the time we went to press or something like that. And it makes it seem like they're doing reporting, and they're not. Because if they were doing reporting, they would have found out the answer to a question.
Right. Yeah, and I've had that said about me when I've never been reached out to,
right.
Which was frustrating because I'm more than happy. I never shy away from a fight. Yeah, you also talked about the safety items issue, and I remember back in 2020 that we actually debated this in the legislature because that was one of Malloy's last taxes. Let's tax safety items like what did you say, athletic jock straps,
yes.
helmets. I mean, what kind of government wants to tax helmets? Do you want people to wear helmets or not?
If you want your head intact, you've got to pay an extra little fee to the government.
Exactly. So it's funny that these things come up, and of course, tax-free week, they couldn't possibly take back the tax on the helmets during that period. But the reason why we were supposed to talk about it is the gas ban. That's why we were supposed to talk the ban on gas-powered cars.
Oh, that's right.
Madness.
Which is a ridiculous story. It's delightful to talk about. It's so stupid.
There's not enough time to talk about all of the different reasons why it's ridiculous. But I will say it's one of the I think there's 3 things right now that the Democrats are doing, which I find tremendously insane and making it very easy for Republicans to challenge them. One is the crime issue. The Democrats keep trying to argue that there is no increase in crime when every person in the state knows that's not true. But if you follow any of the legislative Democrats who are, active on social media and Twitter and whatnot, they keep doubling down. No, that didn't really happen. No one stole your car, Mrs. Jones. You imagined it. It's crazy. That's one.
Well, by the way, that circles back to what we were saying about the lack of news reporting. So we are left to the lies of political parties to try to sort through those lies. And you can see why people just go with the people who make the most sense. You just have your default side that you trust. And everyone in politics complains about that polarization, but we don't have news media that's trying to fill us in and keep us informed.
Right. Well, thankfully, in the case of the crime issue, people have their own eyes. Yes. And the Democrats can keep telling people not to believe their own lying eyes as much as they want, but that's a tough stretch. And I think that more and more as this goes on, because this crime wave has been building over the last decade, but it's at a crescendo right now. I mean, it's crazy, the things every night on the news, and in places it's never happened before. I mean, we have armed robberies in quiet communities in this state. We're having homicides in places we never had them before. And the more that continues, the more people are going to be alerted to it. But what they need to do is recognize that this is a completely one-sided political issue. Don't just blame the government, which is fine with me. You can blame the government a lot. But in this particular case, these are almost all party line votes over the last decade, all the way back to letting violent felons out of prison early, to the police accountability bill, to erasing criminal records, to ending police chases. All of that, every one of those things was a party line vote in the legislature where the Democrats said, we're going to be soft on crime, we're going to undermine the rule of law and police officers, and Republicans said no. And the more people that know that, the better for this election cycle and the next one.
We're talking to State Senator Rob Sampson from Wolcott. Rob, appreciate you being here today. But somebody has to mount a campaign, and maybe this will happen during campaign season, where these agenda items are run through and the blame is laid squarely at the feet of the people responsible. Because, like you say, the paper trail is there.
Stretch, but I think that they are trying to relate to that community and say that the people that are caught up in crime and reciprocity, or not reciprocity, what's the word I'm looking for? Recidivism. It's not their fault, and they're trying to identify with them. But I think there's more insidious reasons too. I think that when there is a significant lack of public safety, people are inclined to turn towards their government to look for help. And this is what the Democrats love more than anything. They want dependency. They want people to look to them for help and guidance as if they're in charge and they're the protectors of everyone. And they can argue that Republicans, are just making hay, or they're racist or bigoted against criminals, when in fact it's not the fault of these individuals on their own. It's society's fault or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they've got in place, and they're practiced at, the rhetoric of dodging responsibility for certain things that are clearly designed by them to create these results on purpose as a way to win elections.
Right. And they rely on division. And this is a mechanism to divide people by race, people that have had, difficulties interacting with police because of the neighborhood they live in, something like that. It's a way just to blow things out of proportion and put people into different camps when it's really not that way. Most people, I think, want to live in a safe neighborhood. I think most people are not, identifying white police officers as if they're somehow automatically violent, bigoted, or racist. I mean, I think that's rare even in the urban environments. But the Democrats are trying to stir that up constantly because they benefit by dividing people.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big thing to have everybody looking at each other with suspicion. And the whole of our political conversation seems now to be stuck in that mode that you're describing. Rob Sampson is here. We're going to take a quick break and continue the conversation on WTIC. We're supposed to be talking about the electrification of cars. This one of the parts of this story, Rob, I was hoping you could fill us in on a little bit, is the degree to which there's centralized planning that goes on, that there's this behind the scenes that people don't see. The huge machinery of the United States government in cooperation with the rest of the world has conspired to push us into electric vehicles without there being the so-called public conversation, without us understanding whether the supply chain will be in place to provide us the materials we need to build all these things, whether we've got a grid that can handle the electricity if we find some way to generate it. Like, how does all this happen?
Yeah, it's a great question, Todd. And I don't know if there's some giant conspiracy and all these folks are actually speaking with one another, or it's just they're all swallowing the same woke groupthink. I mean, it's inexplicable, though.
But isn't it true that the only way you can get people to follow along without having a conversation is to create a flow of money, and that does the talking?
Possibly. I mean, there are certain elements in our culture and business that will benefit in an extreme way if all of this, goes through the way that they're planning it. And there are other people that will be punished. And I think that's been the motivation from the far left for a long time on the subject of, cracking down on quote unquote fossil fuels, et cetera. The oil companies are, inherently Republican,
Yes.
We have to push them in favor of, solar and wind. And we have this beneficial side of our argument that we appear to be the progressive and based on clean environment and green energy and everything else. And that's not necessarily true. There are new technologies happening all the time in oil-powered cars and even home heating fuel. Some of that stuff is as clean as any electric stuff could ever be. But the number one thing wrong with this whole argument in Connecticut about getting rid of gas-powered cars by 2035, which you're absolutely right. The plan is to do that and to do it without really a lot of public comment. There's going to be a public hearing tomorrow, but it's not your traditional public hearing. It's going to be you have to sign up in advance, and it will be with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. It's not a legislative hearing.
They're trying to bury it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's going to happen through the regulatory process. None of the people involved, outside of the governor himself, are really accountable to voters. So these people are going to do what they want. And I'm working hard right now to try and find out whether they're even going to live stream this hearing so that the rest of us can watch it. It just blows me away that this is not widely publicized. And this is a test also for the Connecticut media to see if they follow this and track the number of people. And I'm certain there's going to be thousands of people testifying in opposition because it doesn't make any sense. Number one, our grid in the state runs 90% of it is gas, natural gas. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to power the charging stations for electric cars with natural gas, what are you gaining? You know, I mean, the whole thing seems moot to even have the argument about climate change, which I think Republicans ought to have, actually, because I don't know that the Democrats even know their stuff on the science. And I think that science is a little specious as well.
Yes. We got a minute left. Anything else you want us to know, Rob Sampson?
I just want people to pay close attention to these issues over the next, several months. We've got a big election happening in municipal races across Connecticut. 169 towns are going to elect town governments. And the best thing that we can do to reverse the tide of woke policy in Connecticut is to elect strong Republican town governments. That's the first line of defense. Local government is, probably more impact on the average person than anywhere else. But these issues are going to come up over the next year. There's this issue. There's the protection of education administrators trying to provide secrecy to administrations and so forth in education, to hide information from parents. That's another big issue we're going to hear more about over the next year. And then, of course, the crime issue we talked about.
Yep.
All three of those things, I think, are an illustration that Democrats have really gone astray of what the Connecticut resident, the average person, actually thinks. And I think we should make them pay for it.
Rob Sampson, thank you, sir. Good to talk with you. State Senator from Wolcott. Appreciate it.
Always my pleasure, Todd. Thanks.